The shuttle doors opened with a sigh that sounded suspiciously judgmental, as if even the air systems doubted my ability to behave correctly on an alien world. I stepped out anyway, trying to project diplomatic dignity, which lasted about 3 seconds before my boot caught on a glowing vine that curled across the landing platform like a lazy pet. The vine purred. I apologized. It was, technically, the most graceful arrival I had managed all week, so I counted it as a triumph. The capital stretched before me in spiraling towers and drifting bridges that shimmered in changing colors, like the entire city couldn't agree on a favorite hue and kept rotating through options. The delegation from Earth stood behind me, quietly praying I wouldn't embarrass our species. Wise but futile optimism. The princess approached with that calm, floating stride her people had perfected, long ears elegantly arched, face framed by a silver circlet that hummed in harmony with the city. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, somewhere between curiosity and the patient resignation of someone about to teach a toddler how to use a quantum reactor. I opened my mouth, planning to greet her with rehearsed formality, but instead tripped backward onto what I thought was a decorative platform. It glowed, vibrated, and announced in a booming voice that I had violated sacred convergence protocol. The princess's eyes widened, then she covered her mouth, struggling not to laugh. My delegation groaned as one organism. The royal guards surrounded me instantly, though politely, as if I were a confused tourist who had entered the wrong museum exhibit. The princess stepped forward, studying me with a mix of sympathy and amusement. She explained that by stepping on the sacred platform, I had unintentionally initiated a centuries-old binding rite, traditionally resolved through union with the nearest royal heir. I asked if union meant what I thought it meant. She nodded. I fainted for approximately 2 seconds, recovered, and assured everyone that this was a simple misunderstanding that could surely be undone with paperwork. Her amused silence suggested otherwise. They guided me through the palace while I tried not to panic at the moving walls that shifted to accommodate our path, as though the building were whispering gossip about us. The princess walked beside me, patiently answering my frantic questions. She told me the law was ancient, rarely invoked and mostly ceremonial, but still legally valid. I attempted a joke about Earth having terrible traffic laws too. She laughed, a soft sound that somehow made the hall lights brighten approvingly. She warned me that palace rooms occasionally tested guests by changing gravity levels without warning. I asked if she was joking. She said she wished she were. My first lesson in alien etiquette involved a floating chair that stubbornly refused to lower itself to my height, insisting I prove worthiness by hopping onto it midair. The princess pretended not to watch, though her twitching ears betrayed her entertainment as I performed a series of increasingly desperate vertical leaps. When the chair finally accepted me, I sat triumphant and out of breath while it circled the room, mumbling disapproval in its native mechanical dialect. She apologized on its behalf. Apparently the furniture had inherited centuries of royal attitude. A cluster of ceremonial garments awaited me next, shimmering fabrics that slithered toward me like eager pets. One wrapped itself around my leg and declared it would handle all my future fashion decisions. I asked if declining was an option. The princess informed me that refusal was technically possible but deeply insulting to the garment, which might cry. I had no idea fabrics could cry, but I wasn't about to risk interstellar textile drama, so I let it drape itself proudly over my shoulders. As we walked toward the grand hall for the official announcement, she explained the historic purpose of the law: to prevent outsiders from manipulating the royal line by forcing transparency and shared responsibility. Ironically, in my case, it had done the opposite. I told her Earth would never believe I had accidentally gotten myself engaged to an alien princess in under an hour. She replied that her people would never believe a human could stumble into sacred protocol so efficiently. We exchanged smiles that felt unexpectedly genuine. The hall opened before us like a luminous ocean of starlight. Hundreds of dignitaries waited, shimmering in iridescent attire. I swallowed hard, unsure whether the crowd looked more excited or disappointed. The princess leaned closer and whispered that no one expected me to say anything important. They only wanted to see if I would trip again. I whispered back that I would do my best to disappoint them. When the official decree echoed through the hall, declaring our unintended binding, the princess stood tall, her long ears lifted in regal confidence, while I stood beside her trying to avoid triggering additional ancient laws. Yet somewhere beneath the panic I sensed a shift, faint but real, as if the strange path we had fallen onto might not be entirely disastrous. She glanced at me, a quick, subtle look that carried humor, warning, and something else I couldn't name. And in that moment, surrounded by glowing walls, judgmental chairs, and a destiny I absolutely had not signed up for, I realized the universe had a mischievous sense of humor. The royal shuttle that carried us across her homeworld glided so smoothly that my inner ear refused to believe we were moving at all, which would have been comforting if the windows hadn't been displaying landscapes that kept defying physics out of sheer artistic pride. Floating forests drifted in orderly formation, glowing rivers flowed upward in spirals, and a mountain rearranged its peak as if tidying up before guests arrived. I asked if the mountain often redecorated itself. The princess nodded and added that it once changed shape out of embarrassment during a poetry contest. I couldn't decide whether that was endearing or sinister. Our engagement had become the galaxy's newest entertainment channel, broadcast everywhere by gossip drones that followed us with relentless enthusiasm. One hovered near my shoulder, blinking with predatory cheerfulness. I waved at it, hoping politeness would convince it to leave. It responded by projecting my face onto the side of a passing airship, along with a headline implying I had seduced the princess with forbidden earth charms. She sighed and told me not to take it personally. The drones exaggerated everything. Last week one claimed her cat had overthrown a minor moon. I asked if that was true. She hesitated just long enough to concern me. Our itinerary included compatibility tests conducted by AI priests who looked like metallic librarians with too many opinions. The first test required us to stand inside a levitating sphere that adjusted its gravitational pull to measure emotional synergy. I clung to the princess's arm the moment the floor dissolved beneath us. She tried to maintain her regal composure but eventually burst into laughter when I spun upside down and apologized to gravity for disappointing it. The sphere concluded our synergy level was moderately unlikely yet stubbornly persistent, which the priests insisted was a promising omen. The palace council arranged a banquet to celebrate our impending union, though celebrate might have been too generous a word. Alien foods blinked, hummed, and occasionally tried to crawl away. The princess advised me to ignore anything that whistled. One dish nudged my elbow as if asking for friendship. Another tried to merge with my sleeve in what I hoped was affection rather than predation. When she noticed me debating whether to eat or negotiate with my meal, she covered her smile behind a ceremonial sleeve and told me I was handling it better than most diplomats. I wasn't sure whether that was praise or a grim warning. Between events, she finally admitted the truth about the ancient law. It was originally designed to prevent coercion by ensuring any violation was handled publicly and transparently. But in recent centuries, someone had quietly edited parts of it, burying the original purpose under ceremonial nonsense. She had tried once to investigate the archives but found certain records mysteriously sealed. Her voice carried an edge of frustration she rarely allowed herself to show, and for the first time since the incident began, I saw the burden she carried beneath her composure. I offered to help, though my qualifications consisted of curiosity, clumsiness, and an impressive ability to get into trouble without trying. She accepted anyway. We sneaked into the Hall of Ancestral Records, a vast chamber humming with holographic shelves and suspiciously nosy statues that tracked our movements. The archives responded to her presence with elegant displays of shifting text, but when she attempted to access the sealed files, the projection dissolved into static. A message flashed: access restricted by imperial authority. She scowled and muttered that the council had no right to block royal access, especially hers. I decided to try my luck, half-jokingly placing my palm on the terminal. To our surprise, the interface flickered, hesitated, and then opened a small window displaying a fragment of ancient law, unedited, unaltered, and describing a version of the marriage ritual entirely different from the modern one. According to the original script, the rite required voluntary partnership between equals and could not be forced under any circumstance. The princess's ears stiffened in shock. She whispered that someone had manipulated the law to control succession and political leverage. Before we could read further, the statues suddenly animated, stepping off their pedestals to escort us out for our safety. One politely patted my shoulder and encouraged me to avoid curiosity in the future. As we stumbled back into the corridor, the princess let out a breath that trembled with both anger and purpose. She promised we would uncover the truth, no matter how deep the council had buried it. Our shuttle ride back to the main palace was quieter than usual, except for the gossip drones circling us like enthusiastic insects. One asked loudly if we were having our first lovers' quarrel. The princess shot it a look so sharp the drone pretended to malfunction and spiraled away. Despite the absurdity surrounding us, something had shifted. We were no longer two strangers bound by an accidental violation. We were partners, awkward, mismatched, occasionally upside-down partners, but partners nonetheless. And as the palace lights reflected across her long ears in soft silver arcs, I realized I was no longer terrified of what lay ahead. I was curious, which, historically speaking, had always been my most dangerous mood. The final day arrived with the palace buzzing like a hive that had swallowed too much caffeine. The council insisted the binding ceremony proceed as tradition dictated, which meant layers of pomp, excessive sparkle, and at least 3 rituals involving singing crystals that harmonized badly on purpose. I tried to tell them their crystals were flat. The crystals retaliated by vibrating my teeth. The princess whispered that if I insulted any more sacred instruments, they might add another ritual just to punish me. I promised to behave, which was optimistic of me. Despite the chaos, we had a plan. The hacked ceremonial crown, an elegant device now secretly modified with the princess's clever coding, rested in a protective case, humming like it knew it was about to cause trouble. According to palace legends, the crown amplified whatever truth the wearer spoke during the final vow, projecting it to every citizen across the empire. Normally, it delivered poetic declarations about unity and destiny. Ours would deliver evidence of political corruption and possibly a few of my nervous stammers. A fair trade. As we walked toward the ceremony platform, gossip drones swarmed us with breathless commentary. One asked if I felt ready. Another asked if my species shed fur when nervous. I explained humans didn't shed fur at all. They immediately broadcast that the royal fiancé had confirmed a rare hairless condition. The princess patted my arm sympathetically and muttered that at least they hadn't accused me of overthrowing a moon yet. I reminded her they had done that to her cat. She nodded with grim dignity. The platform rose above the crowd, shimmering with golden light and floating petals that smelled faintly like electronics overheating. Council members lined the perimeter, their expressions a blend of triumph and suspicion, clearly convinced they had orchestrated the perfect trap. The princess squeezed my hand once, steady, deliberate, warm, and stepped forward as the crown floated toward her. It settled on her head with a soft chime that startled me so much I nearly bowed to a decorative column. I pretended it was intentional. The column was unimpressed. The ceremony began. The high priest recited ancient verses that sounded important but mostly reminded me of a user manual for a very dramatic toaster. When it came time for the vows, the crown pulsed, signaling it would broadcast her words across the entire empire. She inhaled, looked at me just long enough to communicate trust, and spoke not of destiny or tradition, but of truth. She declared the law had been altered generations ago, twisted from its original purpose by those who sought to manipulate royal succession. She named the sealed records, the blocked access, and the council's quiet revisions. Her voice rang with clarity, and then the crown amplified her evidence, projecting holographic images of the ancient script we had uncovered. Noise erupted instantly. The crowd gasped, shouted, and argued with such intensity that the floating petals dropped dead out of shock. The council scrambled to override the broadcast, but the crown simply hummed louder, swelling with the princess's righteous fury. And because fate has a sense of humor, the hologram also projected a brief clip of me accidentally activating the archive terminal with startled yelping. The crowd seemed to appreciate my contribution, though possibly for reasons unrelated to heroism. Guards rushed forward, unsure whether to arrest us or applaud. Citizens across the empire erupted in outrage, their holographic protests appearing around the platform like an accidental light show. The council realized too late that centuries of patience had come to an abrupt, technologically enhanced end. With the truth made public, they had no power left to control the narrative. The law was suspended within hours and by the next sunrise, unanimously abolished. The princess stood beside me as the empire roared with change. She removed the crown, now quietly smug, and rested it in my hands. She told me I had helped her reclaim